Podcast Season 5. My name is Brandon Curry, and
I'm Jeff Collins.
Josh Bond.
And Trevor Lindy.
And we have friend of the show, second or third time guest of the show, Brandon Cullen from Raleigh. Is it Raleigh, North Carolina?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Beg your
Close.
pardon.
It's in Charlotte. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Raleigh's
that's
a couple hours north.
Well, thanks again for joining us, and also co-founder of Metabolic, the chain of gyms across the U.S. And also, do you still have the one franchise in Burlington still?
We do.
Right?
My sister, who you know, Ashley,
Yep.
she runs it. Yeah, so it's her business.
And are you looking at any more franchises in Canada, or is just the one right now in Ontario, Burlington, Ontario?
Yeah, I think the Canadian franchising strategy will be a little bit different. I think we have to take more of an area development look at that. So pick some of the hot markets and go in there for a cluster of units versus just one-off. So we're approached often to do single units in great cities, but it's even though we share a border, it's quite a bit different doing business in both countries. And it's not the things you would think. It's more of vendor relationships, different laws, it's just very different. So a lot of the things that we can streamline here in the United States, it's hard to get it across the border. And if you do it, you want to do it for multiple units. So that's probably the easiest way to say it. So it's definitely not out of the question. It's no different than if we were to look at the UK, but I think you really want to take on a strategic partner that's ready to do some volume versus single units.
So since you've last joined us on the podcast, it was during the middle of the pandemic. We'll get into all that, the reopening and all this kind of stuff, because I got to give credit where credit's due. I think, and I'm paraphrasing here. This is not verbatim, but I think you basically said, Canada, you have not been poked enough or pushed enough yet. And I think maybe a month later, we had the big convoy up in Ottawa. And we all know how that ended. But we were talking about, so we have a ton of listeners and people who watch us live across the country now that we're on the Dean Blundell network. But we were just curious if you can let our watchers and listeners know, subscribers know, what is Metabolic, just to get everyone up to speed, and how do you basically compare and contrast to the current franchises, either in the U.S., if you know that more, versus and in Canada?
So we are a group fitness concept, but we are more of a strength bias interval training concept. So if you, I have to use some blanket statements here, as irresponsible as that is, but a lot of the boutique fitness industry is very cardio focused, and we come from a strength biased platform. And then the other thing I think we are very well known for is that one-on-one accountability within a group atmosphere. So again, not better or not worse, but most of the people we compete against is more of a it's called a boot camp nature, where there's a lot of rah and high fives and kind of like inspirational trainers, where ours is more of a one-on-one coaching experience within a group atmosphere is probably the safest way to kind of position it.
So you're not the beach body kind of motif, I guess is.
That's fair.
Not that you don't have a beach body, but that's one of the ones that kind of rah, right? Like,
Yeah, and you know what's weird? And the truth is that market's probably bigger than mine. That core consumer is a bigger part of the North American pie, but it's also a crowded space. So I find kind of targeting our facilities will be very successful at 300 members. So to find 300 more kind of like high achievers that value structure and accountability, I find that kind of laser focus is a lot easier than this kind of broad having to make everyone happy, if that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, I'm little bit over 40, so everything that I've
Just a hair.
Close to 50. Let's put it that way. You're closer to 50, buddy.
Yeah, you're closer to 50 than closer to 40.
I guess so, yeah. But everything that I've read, I've always been a cardio person, right? Like I just love running, just one of those people, right? I'll go for a jog and do my push-ups, do my crunches and stuff like that. But I started reading about your muscle mass and stuff like that, and how it, harder to build and the deterioration of it. So when I was 40, I had never really moved weight before in my life, but then I started working on a more strength training program, not completely doing away with the cardio, right? Just kind of facilitating a little bit of cardio in and kind of supplementing the weight workout. And it feels great, right? Because it's just the whole core, right? Like it's muscle, right? Like,
well, and the truth is the best training program is the one that you're going to do often. So even though maybe I have a biased approach to someone being their best, if it doesn't speak to them and it doesn't get them out of bed and in the gym and moving, it's not going to be a successful program. But yeah, you're right. I mean, science driven, as we get older, gravity starts pushing down, and the only way you kind of push back against that is resistance training. Men, we start battling with testosterone issues. Women battle with bone density issues, and it's not more miles on your joints that take care of that stuff. It's controlled kind of resistance training specific to your ability is probably the best way to say it.
Yeah. What I found, sorry, Brent, what I found too, just in terms of like in the start off, like I really used fairly lightweight, right? Just to kind of get the mechanics down, right? And strengthen those kind of stabilizer muscles, because I tried before initially and I could lift the weight, but then those stabilizer muscles weren't there, and it ended up by hurting myself, right? Like just tweaking my muscles.
Yeah, there's so many belief systems, and I could probably defend and argue all of them. But again, I think, in business, I'm going to definitely push my product. But when I'm dealing with, and that's not always true, right? Because I'm not shy to tell a type of client where they might be more successful. But even like with dealing with friends and family based on their own needs, maybe even just natural athletic ability or where they are in life. If they're just busy, stressed, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But guess what? Cardio is important. Strength training is important. But most important, movement's important. So whatever gets your feet moving, I would say that's probably a pretty good start.
Gotcha. Good advice.
Now, so when we were talking to you last, obviously, how is the status of your franchises? I follow you on LinkedIn, as you know. You've opened up I actually have lost track. I know one was Texas. The other one was, I you know what? I know there was 2 or 3 you opened up right like within a month. And so since we've chatted, how many franchises have you added on in the US?
Yeah, last month was a good month. We opened 3 out of 4 weeks. I think it went Brooklyn. We opened in Williamsburg, which was kind of a cool bucket list thing for my team and the whole company. We opened in a small border town called McAllen, Texas, that you wouldn't think on paper that it actually even makes sense. But we have a very charismatic couple that lives in that area. That's well connected, and there's a lot of young money going there because of government jobs and different things. And then we opened our 5th unit in in DC, and it's kind of on like an iconic street in DC, a fitness street, 14th Street. So we're right across from a Soul Cycle, close to a Barry's. So just one of these iconic fitness streets. So yeah, it was a fun month as far as getting these things open. I think the count now is, and my partners they're always mad at me for never hitting our count, right? But I think we have 25 units open, and we have another 60 to 65 under contract and in development that should take place over these next 12 to 24 months. So
Wow.
it's fun. It's a busy time. Yeah.
Is it busy because the pandemic's kind of ending now, so people are returning to the gym? Or what do you think?
Yeah, there's been some pretty compelling data that has come out in the last even few days about the return to gym. If I'm right, I think the check-ins are at 19% higher than pre-pandemic right now. And Brandon, who has followed me on LinkedIn for a bit, and I shouldn't say followed me, we're connected, we follow one another. But I've been pretty vocal about what exactly is happening. I just never believed, not just fitness. I didn't believe, the new version of going to a restaurant was takeout. I didn't believe people were going to be watching or doing their Sunday service from parking lots. Like I just didn't buy it. And I think
Well,
it's all,
you can see
it's all come
Peloton's
together
taking a beating now, right? Like Peloton's just taking a beating now that people aren't working out from home. I think they're craving going to the gym now. That's probably what's happened. They want to socialize again too.
We're social beings, right? Like
Yeah.
we like to socialize.
That's the thing. I like it. You know what the hardest thing was that I know we all have it, and I'm not speaking for any of you guys, but like I had some close people in my life that were really betting against human connection, and you try to have an intelligent conversation with them, and I'm like, really? I'm like at times I'm like, is Ashton Kutcher about to pop out of the wall and say I'm punked right now? Like I'm like, I just didn't get it. So at the same time too, right? As vocal as I was against what I thought may happen to a Peloton, I'd like to beat them, but I don't also like to see them fail. So there's that weird kind of catch-22 with it too. Yeah.
Same kind of industry, right?
Yeah, exactly. Somewhat fighting the greater good, I guess. But yeah, it's been a rough ride for them. I think a lot of digital concepts. Yeah, I think a lot of digital concepts just overplayed their hand. But I also get that you somewhat had to. It was an opportunity to go after something huge. So you can't hate someone for putting it all on the line.
I think last time you were on a couple of years ago, I don't think you had 10 units out there, did you?
I'd have to actually look at the date. It's been I don't know if you guys look at it the same way. Like COVID feels like a year, but we know that it stretched much longer than that. It's kind of like the Twilight Zone thinking how we operated in that space. So, we slow over the last 3 years, we've opened about 15 additional units and put 50 plus under contract because we made an intentional growth partnership and strategy about 6 months before COVID hit. So we had everything in place to hit go. So yeah, it's been a 3-year grind that took us from that 10 units to the 25 open and then another 60 in development, I think would be accurate.
That's amazing growth.
That's amazing.
Right? Like, I mean, you're since inception from what, 2011-ish, late 2011? Right?
Yeah, and it was weird, right? So my business partner who kind of shares this wall with me, it was just two of us. So like we did, when I say everything, I mean everything from site selection to lease negotiations to building the program to the systems. And I kind of get to sit in a very unique position now, knowing that our first 7 years of being super cautious kind of like what we didn't provide to the well-oiled machine we are now. And it's neat. It's like humbling, but it's also exciting to see it all come together.
Yeah, that's wicked.
So
Good for you.
can you walk us through, I mean, you and we've known each other 30 years, something like that.
Mhm.
Former St. Catharines boy, OHL, pro hockey player, and when you got drafted and you went down to the States, then we lost a little bit of contact, but can you just walk and if there's anyone that's watching, our usuals, if you have any questions to please put it in the chat. Like Brandon would be huge he'd be more than willing to answer any questions, but I got a lot. I mean, how do you learn like how to do a lease negotiation? Like how do you learn how to do, like you said, 7 years of being cautious? I mean, that is a huge undertaking. Who, like, did your business partner have that kind of experience? And like, how did you like learn to price out like what a franchise would cost?
So the quick timeline was when we started, we thought that we would control Charlotte, the market we settled down in. And what did that look like? That looked like maybe over a 5-year dropping kind of 5 units strategically in the right parts of the city. In the first year, we kind of knew we were onto something just because people were asking a lot of questions. The first thing we were approached was big box, big name gyms like YMCA's and Bally's, Total Fitness type gyms saying, would you license your model within our doors? And we're like, that doesn't make sense because we're going to put some powerhouse gyms right in competition with us. Then we had a colleague that said, we have roots in Charlottesville, Virginia. Would you ever consider doing a unit here with us? And that started kind of more of a corporate portfolio strategy that was very capital time intensive, and we didn't really know these people that well. So that had us looking into what does franchising look like, and we hired a consulting firm out of San Diego that helped us build some of those initial systems, but primarily our first franchise agreements and franchise disclosure documents. And what it was we sat with a team of attorneys, 2 1-hour calls every week for about 6 months. And we tried to learn what the process was like. And then for those first 7 years, we took on what we thought at the time were just like slam dunk people or slam dunk markets that came to us. We did no advertising. So as far as learning, I think there was enough time and bandwidth to be involved in everything, to learn how to negotiate those leases, to start small vendor relationships locally that then you knew what to look for when you went to more of a national scale. So there's no simple answer. And I don't think our story is much different than a young entrepreneur that just said yes to everything and fucking tried and failed and got up and kept moving forward. Like there's nothing special about it outside of just
grind it out.
Yeah, I do know we have a good work ethic, and we are okay paying for someone or a service in a skill set we don't have. We don't overextend our skill set. We've always been good at that. And I think that's allowed us to build good relationships and teams around us, which then you learn from, right? So again, I don't think the story is too unique, but that would be the way I would summarize it, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, and to put into context, like how old were you when you started all this? I mean, you and I are the same age, so but how old were you when was it 7 years ago, or you said the first 7 years, but it wasn't 7 years ago. You've been on this for quite a while, haven't you?
2010, 11.
2011 is when we started the franchising concept of the business. We were involved in the primary metabolic business a year before that, but we were experimenting within the CrossFit world before it exploded in late 2008, 9. kind of area. So yeah, I mean, like, and also on top of that too, all throughout my professional hockey career, my summer income was kind of personal training and designing programs for other players, and kind of bartending in the evenings. So I had been, I mean, being 41 now, I've actually been in fitness since I was 21, and probably been training since I was 15, 16. So yeah, I've kind of been doing it for a minute now.
Yeah.
Lifelong.
Yeah. Well,
You,
I mean,
you
it's
touched
been,
on some
yeah. Go ahead, Bondo.
you touched on some key concepts though, right? Like just don't, in business, don't you're not an expert in everything, right? So those things that you don't know your limitations, right? And I think that's good advice for any entrepreneur, right? Like you can't take it all on. You could take a few
Yeah.
lumps and bumps along the way, but
The other thing too is, like, I think we were always kind of aware with our strengths. And the one thing that I always felt good about was feeling comfortable in a room with people smarter than me, like at least feeling I could carry a conversation. And I think I just used that early on to be in enough rooms. And I thought if I kept getting into the right room, I would keep getting opportunities. So, early on, there was kind of like say yes to every opportunity you had to make an impact, or to be exposed to different people or different opportunities. And that, I think now, gives you the right to step back and have a little bit more balance. But that's one of those things I would struggle with, is this everyone wanting balance in their life. And I feel like there's a certain level of work you have to get through to
deserve
have
that.
balance.
Yeah.
Maybe not deserve, but have. I don't know. I think everyone deserves a level of balance. Sure. I think that's a good
Right
human
away.
thing to think about. Yeah, maybe I'm being too political. No, I think you gotta actually work. I think you do. There's
I
a
think
period
so
of time
too.
you gotta work.
Work hard, play hard. Work hard, play hard.
No,
Well,
but to
and if you
appreciate
think,
that, right? Like to appreciate it at a point where how do you appreciate a balance if you don't know the lazy side, which we all did going up as kids and students. We didn't think it was lazy, but come on. I mean, we got 4 or 5 hours of commitment a day, right? And then a lot of us kind of grinded out the 14, 15 hour a day periods, right? So in my opinion, it's only when you have sampled those extremes could you only bring yourself to kind of really truly bring yourself into balance. That's my 2
Yeah, I
cents.
mean, like, I'm right there with you. But that also, I think, is that portion of my ego that I try to keep in check a little bit. But I can't deny that I'm right there with you. You try your best to listen to the other side of it, and maybe it's more of that's an entrepreneurial journey versus something else. But no, I mean, I can't argue with you. I can't argue with you. Anything great that has happened for me in life has been the opposite of a balanced approach. It's often been behind closed doors when nobody's watching and you don't have an audience chipping away to get ahead the next day. And yeah, I don't know how else to put it. It's the only thing I really know.
It's the only thing I've ever seen, right? Like ever come across. That's how you succeed. You grind, right? Unless you inherit money somehow, or unfortunately, or you win a lottery, right?
Mm-hmm.
now thinking back to the last 15 years, you said 2008, 2009, when you and your business partner started to experiment. The Thinking back, like you've gone through now in your first 15 years in business, the Great Recession, which destroyed a lot of businesses, specifically the gym business, in 08, 09, 10, right? And then a pandemic, which also shut you down. Touch on being an entrepreneur and the importance, I guess, and you've kind of touched on it, but I guess the importance of being scared. And, you know, like you've touched on it in previous interviews as well, like how it's not all roses and people only see you at the very end. They don't see the not, you know, it's kind of like an iceberg, right? 90% of it is underneath the water. If you want to talk on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, being a like my hockey career, there was a lot of ups and downs. I mean, not only was I an average player that was, you know, any sniff I got was from a certain level of work ethic. I also had a lot of injuries, so I kind of got used to either getting cut, getting hurt, or failing, or all that stuff. So once I got to business, I mean, the idea of failing never really was a hard thing to understand. So I do think that helped me, and that's why it's tough to speak to. Like, yeah, I mean, like when you get used to going to an NHL training camp every year, you get cut to the AHL team, you maybe stay for a bit, and then you get cut to the East Coast Hockey League, and you're up and down, cut and injuries in between. I mean, you kind of get used to like being stomped on. So that's what helped me in, I think, business from a resiliency side of things. The one thing that is nice about the recession and the pandemic were two different challenges, but weirdly enough, high price point fitness is somewhat a little bit insulated. And the reason is when shit starts to come crashing down, whether it was that pandemic or whether it was the recession, a lot of times people that are in the fitness world and the high-end fitness, they actually reinvest in themselves even more. It's almost like a self-preservation mechanism where it's like, if no one's going to take care of me, I'm going to look out for myself. So usually in fitness, the people that do the $9.99 kind of membership that just let it draft out of the bank account, those types of gyms really struggle. But in the 2008, we had some of our biggest upticks ever during those years. And then in a bit of a contrast, during the pandemic, we always maintained 70% of our revenue throughout the whole thing system wide. And a lot of that was not only the core customer and consumer supporting us, but us being able to produce enough good content for them to be at home. So it's a tough one to answer for me because the people I get to interact with and the people that pay my bills, they're a driven bunch. That kind of helps where I sit.
More individual, right? The way you run your operation, right? So they want to be there.
Yeah, they want to be there. Like, here's a good way to put it. If we didn't exist, they'd be training their ass off somewhere. We've just managed to create an environment where a lot of high performing individuals like to sweat beside one another. But if we didn't exist, they'd still be doing their thing for sure.
So most of them high caliber athletes that train with you, or is there the average Joe as well that just in terms of your membership?
Yeah, the average Joe's our wheelhouse. It's just a mindset. So it's not a body type. It's more of an individual that not only do they demand professionalism, they expect it, they'll pay for it, like they want experience, they want a little bit more out of life, and it transcends outside of the gym. I mean, they're the guys drinking the bougie coffee, the right craft beer, and the best whiskey. Like, they just want the best out of life for themselves. So yeah, like, so for me to like, that's such a laser focus versus like a shotgun approach for 100%. Other businesses. And that's why I find I like this space better. I know why the other space is popular, but I feel more comfortable in this environment.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and why wouldn't you want to speak to a professional, right? Yeah, you speak to a professional for money, you know, Brandon, you know what I mean? You speak to a professional to buy a house, in myself, Trevor.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. But yeah. It only makes sense to care about your most important asset, yourself, right? That you speak to somebody that knows a little bit more than the average Joe.
Yeah, and the other thing I find, and I know it's a bit of a harsh statement to make, but I think I can't say North America just because I haven't been in Canada enough, but in the United States, I find like we're the best country in the world at average. So it's not hard to step outside of average. We're great at the Cheesecake Factory concept. We're the best at it. But I mean, to just step outside of that, it's not hard to stand out. So I feel like there's a lot of white space to do something just a little bit different or a little bit unique and maybe better for certain people.
So Crazy Cheech has just logged in. So hi, Crazy Cheech, and yes, you're motivated is definitely a very good adjective to use when discussing the clientele for sure. The Basically, when we were chatting over LinkedIn there, you wanted to touch on a bunch because and I want to hear it from your side of it. The hiring process, because you are somewhat involved in the hiring of your own facilities, but definitely your franchisees do their own, but you also hear it. How are you this new quiet quitting? This whole I'm just not going to show up to work today. This is kind of what you're touching on with kind of standing above the crowd, right? And it's not that hard to just put in some extra work. But if you want to touch on that as an entrepreneur, as an employer, like how do you survive in this type of an environment when you've basically put it all on the line, but then on top of that, like you have just employees just not bothering, or even in sometimes members just not even gonna, I'm just not gonna show up to class today or something like that. um but that was, yeah, you wanted to touch, we were just chatting back and forth on that.
You lost your volume.
We lost the volume there.
I'm back.
Nice.
I said, I don't know if you guys are feeling this too, and I've kind of been using this analogy, but like so much has changed with the pandemic, yet so much is the exact same. And I wonder a lot of times when I'm thinking about quiet quitting or hybrid work or return to the office or work remote, if you step back, I think all of them were always there. There's always been hybrid work. Especially in the United States, I mean, most of my people were hybrid working before the pandemic. I think there's been quiet quitting going on for a long time. I think there's been quiet firing going on for a long time. It just seems now it's in people's mouths. There's a bigger voice for those complaints, but I don't really are we finally the old guys that are talking about the lazy young generation? Like, are we any different than our parents that were complaining about the young generation complaining about us?
We weren't lazy though. We weren't lazy. I don't the bulk of us weren't lazy, I don't find.
I think the same way. I think this is where I put myself in check. Like, is it just a louder voice? I don't know. Now, if you're working for me and you want to quiet quit, don't worry. I can't wait to fire and not hire you. And I cannot wait to promote the person that's working their ass off behind the scenes. So
100%.
Trust me, I'm not tiptoeing around that. By any means.
But you are in North Carolina.
Yeah, and you know what? We're in Charlotte is one of the fastest growing, if not millennial-driven Gen Z cities in America. So it is a fast-paced, fun, aggressive young market. And it's not as Manhattan. It's not as California. There's a little bit of a blend of old kind of Southern with new blood too. So there still is a work ethic there. But yeah, having two young kids, and they're 10 and 7 now, Grayson and Logan. And I don't like some of the narrative that they're exposed to. I'm not a fan of participation trophies. I'm not a fan of everybody is special. I'm not a fan of always wearing your feelings on your sleeve. I mean, there's a time
fail.
for everything. Yeah, there's a complete time for everything. But from where I stand, I get nervous about, the way they'll come through life versus the way we did. I mean, Brandon, we were joking about my dad, before we got on the thing, but like,
Yeah.
I never felt unsupported, but I was pushed and I loved it. So I know now I'm circling around, guys. I didn't give you a clean answer, but yeah, I'm not a fan of the narrative being pushed today. I'm not. I just, not a huge fan of it.
Well, it's you hit a lot on you oh, for those that are watching, Bono just had to step out for just a quick second. He'll be right back. But no, you hit on a lot of things. I'm off all social media except for LinkedIn. Now, I understand everyone else who might need social media or want social media for business purposes and stuff like that. I get it, but for me, the negative impacts to my business from a reputational standpoint were far greater than any positive. For example, in the first 5 years that I was still on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that in the business, I could probably count maybe on one hand the referrals or the leads that I used to get, and the only thing that I found that were getting through to people were the cat videos and the pictures of what you're having for dinner. Like, and I just kind of sat back and I'm like, like people actually really care about this stuff? I mean, I grew up and the guys on the table right now, and Colin, you can easily say, like, do you remember we'd go away for vacation and your parents would be like, don't you dare tell anyone at school that we're going away for March break, even though now as an adult I'm like, it's March break, everyone goes away for March break. If you're going to rob a house, that's the great time to rob a house, is during March break. But nonetheless, we were scared, to not even say a damn thing. And now, fast forward, 20 years later, and people are posting when they're in the airport taking off. It's just kind of like, and you're broadcasting that to the entire world. It's just the whole keeping up with the Kardashians piece. I don't subscribe to. If you hit a milestone, cool, but there is that fine line to what you're touching on, between actually achieving something great and, okay, good, like it's a good for you, very much like yourself, Brandon. I always felt supported at home. My parents were hard, and like, but not overly hard, but definitely drove me. And it was one of those, whenever I got an A on a report card, as an example, kids in
Few
my
and far
class,
between, I'm
this is
sure.
where it started. Hey,
Few and far between, I'm sure.
that's right. Yeah, it just never happened. Okay, but I'd bring a report card home, and my parents would be like, I'm like, I got an A because Johnny got a game console for getting an A. And I remember my dad vividly saying to me, I expect you to get an A. I'm not rewarding you for something that I know that you can already do. You know what I mean? And like, they just never subscribed to any of that kind of stuff. So you're not nuts. I completely am aligned with everything that you're saying. Not sure. Okay, so Jacob says quiet quitting is doing the job you are paid for, no more, no less, not showing up early or late, going extra mile, or doing less. As employer, I would love to have employees who did this.
Who didn't show initiative?
Okay.
I think he's saying
Yes.
that's hard enough to find just that right now.
Oh, yeah,
rather
okay,
than,
okay,
you
yeah.
know,
Oh,
Yeah.
like
He's
not people just doing the bare
poking fun
minimum.
at
He's
it.
like, I'll
Yeah.
take whatever I can get right now. Really, right?
Yeah. That
And you
makes
know
so the
what?
labor pool. Go ahead,
Go
Colin.
ahead, Rand. I was just going to say, and I guess we can read that and in many ways, right? And if that's what Jacob wants for his business, that's the beauty of being able to run your business the way you want. Like, I don't want that. I do want someone going over and above, and someone should have that right. I think where, especially in the United States, where we're getting polarized now is Jacob should be able to say that, and I can say, right on, Jacob, that's cool. But I should also be able to say the opposite, and Jacob should be like, cool, Brandon, that's awesome, because that's your company, that's what you want. And
100%.
I don't know where it became where there was just one way of doing things. You know what I mean? So that's, again, I can never speak to Canada the way you guys can living there right now, but like that's the biggest thing now is like your friends, colleagues, family are telling you how you have to live, whether it's politically or business wise or on a personal level. And instead of saying, oh, that's a cool way to look at it, like, awesome, you do you. I'm going to do this thing over here. And I don't know if we ever had that. Maybe I'm naive to think that, but I feel like it's so dogmatic right now that I can't prioritize type A go-getters. What if that's how I want to build my team and I want nothing less? I'm allowed to say that as much as that pisses someone off. And that's where it gets weird.
For me, I can see Jacob's next comment. Like, I chose a commission-based industry because if I wanted to kick some ass, I want to make extra money for it, right? So I understand what he's saying, that if you're working for some people, and those personalities might, kind of steer more towards entrepreneurship, where they're putting in the extra effort, making the extra money. And it is hard to find some of those people to work for you, because for me, I didn't want to work my ass off for no extra money, right? So if I wanted to work my ass off, I went commission-based, which is not for everybody, without a doubt. But I wanted to put in the extra effort and be rewarded for that. So either you got to be the owner or something commission-based. So I kind of understand what he's saying there. And then maybe that personality just isn't suited for working for someone else, right?
Well, and Jeff, I couldn't agree with you more, because I get to sit in a fortunate position of never having to had worked for anybody. Mm-hmm. And I mean, let's remove like in business, not hockey. It's a different thing, but sure. I've never had to go through a commute to a cubicle I hate to now go over and above to impress my boss. So I'm very careful with a Bank of America employee that hates their office culture, that has a 45-minute commute, that now has found comfort at home. Like I hear that on the human side of things. I think I'm just saying my personality, if I'm setting out to build a business, I'd probably build it a specific way. And I think that's okay. And I also think the other version is okay too.
And then a hybrid, right? A hybrid could work depending on what the business is and 100%. The needs of the business, right? Because in our business, you have some clerks that are idling, and then you have others that are pushing hard, and you have some lawyers that are idling, and you have others that are pushing hard as well, right?
It's almost like he's talking about the dynamic of his specific business. Yes. He's coasting. Yeah. John's working hard. Both of his clerks work wonders. They're amazing. Maybe clerks with the other solicitors might be a different story, though.
But Bond worked his ass off to get in that position to be able to do that now, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. But we're talking here and now.
But I think though, honestly, I think the big thing is and Rookie, if you can keep us up on the 5 panel, that'd be great. Because I'd like to hear what everyone says. But I think a lot of people, Trev, you got a story that I'm going to let you talk to without mentioning the hiring piece with the interviews and stuff like that. About how many people. Yeah, you know which one I'm talking about. But it's not so much the fact that, I guess, to Jacob's point, that you're just showing up on time, working, doing what you said you're going to do, and then leaving at you're 8 to 4, and then that's what you want to do. Then great. My whole thing is put in 100 and 110% while during those 8 hours. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
But then don't turn around to someone like myself, or let's say my business partner, who myself and 2 others are buying out. Doug, who Brandon, you loosely know Doug Smith, but the other guys do know Dougie, and and look at he's driving the Land Rover, and then he's 58, and he's puts in insane hours, bought Yeah, bought a Corvette off off of a great dealership in St. Catharines.
Super plug.
And people are like, I want that. It's like, yeah, okay, you can work 75 hours a week.
Well,
That's how he got
I
it.
think the problem is a lot of people get mad when they're comparing someone's 50th chapter to their own personal 10th chapter in their life, right?
Amen.
Where
Amen.
you might be at the top of the mountain right now, but what took you to get there? And don't bitch about me being up there because you don't know
100%.
what kind of time I put in to get there. So
that's it.
You got to earn the balance, right? You got to earn balance.
You can't turn around to me and say, well, I can't buy a house and I can't do this. And grant you, I'm not saying the housing prices and the mortgage rules, and we've touched on that in previous episodes. But what we're saying is like, we all got to where we are by putting in a lot of time and a lot of effort. And it's the iceberg. You don't see 90% of what we do. And Trevor, I remember, when you and I first met 8 years ago, and I had two young ones at home, and I was putting in, and I remember you making a comment going like, I don't know how you do it, bud. I'm like, I have no choice. Now he's just as a hard worker as me, but like the social engagements is what you were referring to, Trev, from a networking perspective. And I appreciated the comment, but it's that type of stuff that drives us nuts. Is that it's like, well, I want what you have, but I don't want to put in the same time or the same effort. And Jeff, you hit the nail
part of that
right
too
on
is the failures, right? Like when you get knocked down, you got to get back up too, right? It's not like you have a big monster failure, which I've had several, but you don't just quit and go home. You got to get yourself off the mat, get back up there and start swinging again, right? And that's what people don't see, because I'm not about to start promoting all my failures, but I'm back out there hustling again, right? Because you have no choice if you want to make it. Either you got the drive or you don't have the drive, and it's hard to train people to have the drive. It's great to have experience to lead you to get there. And sometimes you get a couple tips that make you think, hey, it's not as crazy as you think it is. But to me, people either have the drive or they don't have the drive. And the people who don't have the drive usually work for the people who do have the drive. And that person who's got the drive had to get those failures to get to that point, but it's tough.
There's two different types of drive, right? There's drive to succeed, to get to that next level. If you pare it down to a McDonald's franchise, you know what I mean? You go from a line cook or whatever it is, you want to get promoted to manager. I guess what Brandon was saying, and what I agree with, is I don't give a, if you don't want to get to manager, I don't give a shit. That's up to you. But on the line, make the best damn hamburger that you can every time you make it, period. Yep. Why should there be exception there?
My whole thing is, if my kids turn to me and want to be, a sanitary engineer or whatever, like garbage collector, I don't care. Whatever they want to be, whatever makes them happy. Like Colin, you always say, you're searching for life's bracket imperfections, right? Like I love that slogan on your LinkedIn. And just be the best garbage person you want to be. Like, just be the best. Be number one is what I care about. But Trev, you touched on, and Brandon, I want your comment and insight on this from a hiring perspective. Like, we won't mention who the employer is or anything like that, but go ahead. You had a great story, and how you were telling me about it.
I was talking with an individual close with. And we were chatting, and he was in the middle of doing an interview process for his business, and he was hiring for two specific roles. He was hiring for basically a warehouse supervisor, and he was hiring for a delivery driver. And 8 interviews scheduled, 3 people show up. Out of the 3 people that show up, the one individual is asked, "Why are you looking at leaving your current employer?" And the guy started spouting off derogatory comments about our manufacturing industry here in Niagara and the influx of certain ethnicities coming in and destroying everything. And this guy is making these comments in the middle of the interview to the hiring manager. And the funny part is, the guy went on for about 10 minutes, and the hiring manager at the end of the interview just said, "Well, appreciate your time. We'll be making our decision by the end of the week." He tells me after the fact that the guy that this guy was being interviewed for a driver position, but the guy in the front runner for the warehouse supervisor is that ethnicity. He's like, I want to hire that guy. This guy's as useless as tits on a bull. I'm not going to bother. And he just left it at that. But that's the scary reality that so many employers are faced with right now.
Brandon, you want to weigh in that, and also expectations and the I guess the demand.
And I think I have an interesting question for Brandon too. You talk about these premium workers you want for you, right? The ones that hit out of the box. What do you do to retain them?
Great question.
Incentivize.
What pay well is like, I think is, that's another thing that there's an expectation of the younger generation, and it's a combination of them having the skill set day one. And I know I can make the argument, you got to earn your stripes and you'll learn from mentorship, but they're coming with a skill set. And I even see that in our business, the mid 20, from a technology side of things, just the speed, sure. It's different speed. And they want to be paid for that speed today. And I don't necessarily hate that. Like I know the earn your stripes, but I also like the balls of being like, I'm better than you today, and I expect to, like, in a weird way, like there's, because I feel like if I'm 25 and had that skill set, that's probably how I'm coming to the table too. But the one thing that
knocks you out and you shake his hand, right?
Exactly. But the other thing too is, no matter where we are, you need worker bees as much as you need the queen bee. So you can't discount that, right? I think as far as hiring, we've been taking a very specific approach now, hiring for kind of charisma and drive and teaching the skill set. Like someone said on the panel here, it's hard to teach that drive, but some skills are easier to teach. But yeah, like not related, but related. I mean, as you guys know, I'm in the States, and when you talk about some divisive conversations, and it's wild at times. It really is. Going through Black Lives Matter here was wild. As a Canadian kid, growing up where I think, Brandon, I think in our high school, we might have had a couple kids of color, right?
That's right.
You know, just seeing how passionate, emotional, like it was a wild time, being from where I grew up. So, but there's really no place for it. It's I don't agree with the handout job, but I do agree with opportunity. We even work with a local company here pretty closely that through the sports world, they give the underprivileged, an underprivileged set of communities the opportunity of access and through the sports world. So it's called Sports Biz Camp. So I believe in all that stuff too, but
we have a kids sport, I think, here. Right?
What's that called?
Kids sport. And I think that kind of helps with some funding and equipment for underprivileged children, right? So it gives them some exposure to it.
Did you see the funding with Hockey Canada? They pulled everything, pulled it all.
Jesus.
That's a hot topic right now.
And I'll give you a real cool thing that I'm proud about. So my partner, her company is a very inclusive, mission-driven company that takes all of this chatter, and she's on the people side of the business. So she's always looking at bettering their organization, their team, their partnerships, and all of their hubs throughout the United States through culture and diversity. And when I took her to my last year, our Christmas party, we all went to a hockey game with my entire staff, and we have a very diverse staff, and we've only ever hired for quality. And she made a comment. She goes, and the person that's the least diversity searching employer has the most diverse staff. So it's such a weird way to look at it, right? We've always looked for great people, and it didn't matter a color or really a background. And we have a very diverse team, which is fun. And her whole company chases this, and it's a challenge. So it's just, I don't know. I thought I've always taken pride in that statement she made about a year ago.
I've got a comment here. One of our listeners is writing me. He can't make a comment on there right now, so I want to read it. It's from Jeremy. He said he jumped in late, but he said he thinks there's a lack of motivation is what I find with employees. Too many of them are still living at home with no responsibility or need to excel or impress at work. It is easier for them not putting themselves in tough situations since they have no real financial responsibilities. So he made that comment. I thought it was, something that's apropos right now. I read it out. He can't. I think does he have to be on the Dean Blundell network in order to comment on the site, or
how does it work? I've got no idea.
Okay, I know you got to be Rookie. You can write us in the private chat, but that's what he's saying, because there's a lot of younger people that don't really need the money and they're staying home. Part of the reason they don't have the money or don't need the money is because they can't afford a house. So that's one of the.
Well, I was going to ask that, because
that's an issue.
I was going to ask that because you can somewhat guess, right, what your friends could be making back home in Canada, and then I can look at what housing cost is, and it blows my mind. Like, it blows my mind.
We've got friends down right now from Philadelphia, and we're telling them the house prices. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that's how much you're paying for this stuff."
I know. Like, even like knowing my sister lives in Burlington.
Insane. Burlington's insane.
Jesus, not even insane.
I'm like, what is your house worth? I'm like, this is wild. So,
yeah.
But I don't understand how that math equation works, and so I want to be somewhat empathetic to that kid living at home that literally can't get out. I don't know. It's tough to understand.
Well, see, this is an interesting thing because we're going through it right now. Me and Trevor are working with clients, and I've got some young buyers, and I say, you need 30 grand. You need 30 grand. We can buy you your first house, and if you work on a property in a year and a half, we can turn that 30 grand into anywhere to 80 to 100,000 tax-free money, right? So a lot of people out there saying they can't afford it, they can't do it. Like, there's ways to get an RSP loan and all that to get your down payment and all that, but 30 grand's your target you got to hit. And you can buy a $400,000 house, fix it up, and make some money in a year. Yep. So it is possible out there. They need that. It's more possible than people think out there, and especially right now because the market's getting attacked, and the crappy houses that need work are available readily right now. Like, I'm hungry for buyers right now because I'm making people money off of it, but it's more affordable than people think. Like between a couple, you should be able to come together with 30 grand somehow if you're working hard. It's not that hard. Like, it's hard, but you got to work hard, and you can find it. Beg, borrow, steal, whatever you got to do, get that down payment. Because the sooner you get in the market, the sooner you're going to be ahead. But not everybody looks at it that way. So it's different.
No, and I've had these conversations, and same with Trevor's had the conversations too. Like, when I'm talking to clients and even staff, and this is going back before the pandemic, and they're just like, well, we want a 2-story or a bungalow, 2,000 square feet, yada yada yada, and I'm like, I had a condo, like a condo apartment building is what I started out.
They want their third house, not their first time buyer house. They want their third house.
You just can't. Like, at the end of the day, now the mortgage rules, that's political. That's something completely out of everyone's control, and everyone's facing the same type of hurdles. But just I wanted to give a shout out to, again, our listeners and our watchers. Thank you very much for commenting. Jacob's right. Try Barry. Barry is insane. The realist PJ is saying that's the free market. They just need to work harder. Amen, brother. I think it also, I wanted to, Brandon, when I was you're telling there, I think, notwithstanding, and I want to make this perfectly clear, notwithstanding the equality of sexes and races and stuff, I typically don't err on the side of equality. I am more erring on the side of being equitable, and giving people that need, making sure that everyone starts at the same starting line. And then that's
hard though. That's hard.
Equality, it is hard, but equality. So there's massive studies, lots of psychological studies, basically, I guess, how can I say this? In Scandinavia, the more equal you make the market, the further the further away from diversity you actually get. So the more government intervenes and tries to make the market equal, the further you actually get. So to your point, Brandon, your business partner who searches for diversity has a hard time finding diversity. But for someone like yourself, I just want the best of the best, you actually have some of the most diverse teams. So it's actually there is some science to that, believe it or not. That I've been reading.
Don't force the issue; let it come naturally, right? Don't force it.
You just look for the best, and then you'll naturally get a diverse team.
Yeah, I mean I think that's loaded. I think especially here. I mean, I never really saw true poverty until I got to the United States. I never saw true race until I got to the United States, and I never really understood like the
harshness.
The difference between diehard Republicans or diehard Democrats, and like as much as a lot of times people try to relate the countries being very close, the United States is a different animal, and it is a capitalistic sink or swim country, and there's parts of it I love and there's parts of it that I hate. But it suits me, if that makes sense. But again, I do. And when I was saying my partner, I didn't meet my business partner. I actually met my partner, my girl, at home. So her
beg your pardon.
Okay. Yeah.
But, your business partner's a guy, right?
That's right. My business partner's a guy. Yeah. But I was pretty naive until I, spent some time in New Orleans and saw what Katrina did, stuff like that. Even parts of Charlotte. Like I just did not realize how displaced some populations are here. Is the only way I could say it.
My dad does a lot of, as you know, my father, former General Motors, does a lot of consulting, and he gets flown, Mexico and all over the states, predominantly a lot in Ohio. And he said the same thing. Like we're fairly insulated up here, right? And especially in the city of St. Catharines, like we had only, like you touched on, Brandon, like a couple families of color, but we were just kind of like, oh, okay, and we just kind of moved along, and there was really I never saw any overtly racism, and I think I'd have to talk to that family specifically, but I didn't. I mean, nothing. I just I didn't really see it. But you're right. When they go down to the States, it's definitely a different beast. But I'm not saying it doesn't exist in Ontario or Toronto. It 100% does. But to your point, you can be very easily ignorant of what's going on around the world. And
I think it exists around here pretty good.
But our measure of poverty, though, is just mental health, right? Because I mean, you're taken care of here, right? Financially, you're taken care of here, and you can survive. There's no reason for you to be truly poverty stricken, like in the States, right? Because you are going to be towed along, unless you have a mental health issue and you end up on the streets, and that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and that was one of the things, Josh, when at the height of the pandemic, where Canada was still always about 6 months behind in the frustrations. Like I'd be having conversations with friends and family at home, and they'd be like, "What the hell are you guys doing there?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not doing anything." I'm like, relax. But what I tried to explain to them, I'm like, your wages and your rent that is covered. We don't have that. I'm like, so it's easy to shelter in place when rent is paid for, when salaries are taken care of, and when everyone in the country is doing it. We got our backs got put against the wall. A lot of business owners that you had to open or you were done. And it's just it's a different dynamic at times. And again, like I became a citizen here because I do love it here, but I'm not naive to admit to some of the problems we deal with here. And it's on a bigger scale. It's more aggressive. It's more harsh. I think you use that word, Brandon. That's about a perfect word, harsh. And you know what I also think is crazy too. A lot of times, from the the people looking in, whether it's like a strict CNN watcher or a strict Fox watcher, right? I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, 20 miles north, south, east, or west. You go back 30 years into the deep south. And I think a lot of times people talk about lack of access and lack of education, and they relate it to a color of a skin. Head to parts of South Carolina or Georgia.
Yeah.
And that same level of lack of education, lack of access happens to a lot of colors of skin. And I think a lot of times race is wrapped up with a lot of socioeconomic issues we have everywhere in the United States.
Brandon, just to your earlier point, Curry, I think what happens in terms of the whole equality, and you see it in the police forces and stuff like that, they try to hit these freaking quotas of, you know, females or non-Caucasians, and I think the problem is they're trying to catch them up, right? Because there's not an equal representation or a fair representation of these people. But I just think it's a very tricky way of going about it, because I genuinely think that I've always been of the belief, I don't give a shit what color your skin is, what gender you are.
I think the biggest thing is you look at that NFL rule. What is it, the Rooney Rule, where they have to interview 2 or 3 minorities before they do it, and it's just almost like half the time they just do it to say they did it, and then they hire someone else anyways. It's almost stupid how they do it. Mm-hmm. Just hire the best person, period. Don't put a rule in place. You have to just do it or make it.
No, but I guess what I was saying is that for some of these groups have been somewhat oppressed, right? So
yes, 100%.
The argument for trying to catch them up is to give them, I suppose, preferential treatment in the hiring process. Now, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with that, but I'm sure we can all understand why some of these processes are put in place.
Well, on Brandon's point, getting everyone to a equal starting position is the important thing. It's not a handout job. Even like my partner, Kirk, he before we got into the gym business, so he went into the firefighting spinoff out of hockey. And North Carolina was one of the states they didn't immediately place you based on the union. And he placed 1 or 2 for the testing every year and never got a job based on these laws.
Right?
And the crazy thing is, if I'm in a burning building,
yeah, it can affect lives, could cost lives. Jeez,
send in the best. You know, this is so. But again, too, like we are touching the surface of some wild changes that would have to be made here, even more so than the stuff that's most frustrating for me. Like some of the women's right to choose being challenged now, and you know, I'm a big, I hate guns. So if there's one thing that I will fight against forever, is that's not a thing here. But I mean, these are, to move the needle on some of these things, it's wild.
The gun thing is unbelievable.
Biden's going to be reviewing the laws on marijuana, I understand, in the States.
Saw that, yeah.
That'll be interesting. So yeah.
If everybody's stoned instead of drunk, there's probably less crime.
That's why we're so happy and easy going out here. We're all high.
Let's get everybody baked instead of drunk, and we're going to save lives.
It's so hard to get angry when you're high.
It's so hard to get off the couch when you're high. Never mind to go somebody up, right?
Control it and tax it. You guys got a muddy pit you're not tapping into. That's what I'm saying. Like
100%.
There's a lot of opportunity
they're tapping in down here now. Yeah. There's more cannabis dispensaries than there are Tim Hortons now, almost.
Doesn't it make you want to open one up?
No.
Maybe not.
So we're getting close because I know a couple of us had a hard stop in a couple of minutes, but I wanted to kind of, so out of the back to just to do a little bit of a pivot back, Brandon, you said you had about 50 to 65 or 60, 65 under contract that are under the build. Any of those in Canada right now, or you haven't gotten that in none of that is in the pipeline? That's all over the US.
No, like I said, we had a opportunity for a big deal in Toronto that we looked at, and that would, like, just to give you the scale we're looking for. I think in Canada you got to do like the big markets. I think you got to do
Toronto,
Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. Potentially, like I haven't paid attention to like Calgary lately. I don't know if you do that, but you got to do the big ones, right? You have 4 or 5 that you can do, and I think when you do them, you do 5 to 10 units there, and you wait for a Canadian presence and that is well capitalized to tell you this is how they want to do it versus teaching someone how to do it. That's the strategy for now. I know it doesn't sound super optimistic, but it's more just waiting for being patient for the right opportunity, because I know it works. It has to be around major markets.
Oh, we've got close to 700 people watching us live right now. So, and then we usually hit over 2 to 3,000 people that watch us streaming. So if there's anyone's interested, can they just hit you up at metabolic.com? And is that how you?
Yeah, that's an easy way to inquire, and that will get you through to our franchise sales team that I'm connected to. So that's easy. You can also DM me on LinkedIn. That's an easy way if you want me to put you in direct contact with someone, if you're interested. But in truth, that's exact. Like, if you guys know some of the big names, so if you think of the Orange Theories and the F45s, they went in with massive area development deals. Like, I think, funny enough, I think the hockey player Trevor Linden is responsible for the Vancouver Orange Theories. Okay. But yeah, like going in for one unit, just the cost to do business and the cost to get all of your documentation and paperwork and all that, you want to go in for a bigger deal. And we're just being patient for that.
How did you come up with the name Metabolic? I love that name.
So MAD is an acronym that represents the 3 styles of classes or intervals we run. So momentum, anaerobic, or durability. And the whole program is somewhat centralized around metabolic conditioning. So naturally, just a play on words, a little bit of branding, a little bit of truth. So yeah.
That's badass. Sounds badass and scientific.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
People can listen to you too. I believe you've got a podcast.
Yeah, I've been lazy. Yeah, I've been a bit lazy. It just was a year, right? In a good way. Like, okay. I have no excuses for it. The thing about the podcast, if I'm being like blatantly obvious, when you get to a certain level of scale, you're trying to create systems that, and I hate to use the word cookie cutter in a bad way, but you have to make everything streamlined. And some of that removes some personal creativity, and now making sure the system is functioning the right way, right? Yeah, so the podcast 100%. For me it's a nice like creative space to interview people that like inspire me. So there's no real agenda behind it, but once I have a good buddy or colleague that I think would be interesting to have a chat with, that's how it kind of came together. And I just got to get my ass back to doing it. Because from what I hear, people like it. I mean, they might be blowing smoke up my ass, but who knows?
Yeah, you can't buy time, eh? You can't buy time.
Well, we'd love to have you on again in a couple months or whenever you're free. And also, please let us know when you have any great excitement. Like, if you ever do a giant rollout of Canadian franchises. Obviously, you and I will stay in contact. Yeah, thanks very much again for your time and for coming on.
65 is
really great
That's
chat.
Awesome.
It was a really, really great chat. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anyone else have any last minute questions, or are we good? Bondo, if you want to take us out.
Great job, great growth.
Awesome.
Keep it up.
Keep crushing it.
No, and I want to say thanks, right? Because it gives me a different look from a different vantage point. hearing it from, you know, people are living in a different space. I mean, to a degree, we are all a product of our environment. Like that's a real thing. It really is. So it's nice to hear, whether it's an opposing perspective or just a different way to look at things. So I always appreciate that opportunity.
And thanks to all our thanks to all of our listeners. Thanks to Brand Boulevard, to our sponsors, and Jacob and all the listeners that are commenting. We really appreciate it. We love the banter. We love the questions and the banter. It's great. Please keep it coming. Bondo, take us out.
Help us help you stay informed.